again, everybody. This is Rusty, aka William Robinson, aka Dr. Robinson, and I am the Blues Doctor. And this is my podcast, The Blues Doctor Recommends, and we're glad you're here. As Blues Doctor, I like to take on the messy questions surrounding healthcare, the uncomfortable questions that most analysts don't like to touch because they don't fit their bias. I like to take those questions on as the Blues Doctor, but I like to do it my own way. First, I decide on the question, then I do as much objective, factual research as I can, and then make a decision. And then once I've made a decision, I'll stick by it, even if I'm criticized for it. I grew up in a working class family. I managed to get through medical school and college and medical school, and then about a 40-year career as a physician, administrator, academician, researcher, and some other hats. So I have something of a unique perspective on medicine in the U.S. as it exists today. And I don't neatly fit into a left wing or right wing column, so you might be surprised at some of the conclusions that I come to. So please sit back, hit like and subscribe, share, give us comments, all of those things, and we'll get on with it. We're continuing today with our series on medicine and faith. So far, we've looked at a historical overview of that topic. We've looked at some of the positives and negatives that are associated with the intersection between faith and medicine, and we've looked at faith healing. This week, I'd like to take a look at faith in the context of medical education. The standard medical school curriculum has come almost 360 degrees over the last 100 years or so as it regards the teaching of faith and religion as part of the curriculum. Prior to 1900, there were wide variations in the curricula of U.S. medical schools. Many schools were church affiliated and contained at least some element of that particular church's theology in its regular education. The Catholic schools, for example, frequently taught sexuality, reproduction, and contraception in the context of the Catholic Church's approach to those topics. Some of the Baptist or fundamentalist churches downplayed or minimized genetics as part of their curriculum because it interfered with or was in conflict with their beliefs on heredity and evolution. That changed significantly with the release of the Flexner Report in 1910. This report, written by Abraham Flexner, was a landmark assessment of the state of medical education in North America. It summarized and publicized the numerous variations in curricula and standards present among American medical schools, as well as the uneven quality of physicians who graduated from those schools. The report advocated for a science-based and university-based model as opposed to a church-based or independent model of medical education. The report led to the closing of many substandard schools and the rise of a modern standardized approach to medical training, which still exists more or less to this day. While it has been widely credited with increasing the quality of medical education, the report has also had significant negative consequences, including the marginalization of faith-based schools, alternative medicine, and particularly the systematic exclusion of Black medical schools. In fact, of the 24 or so Black medical schools that existed in 1900, only 2 survived the 1920s. That was Howard in DC and Meharry in Tennessee. And part of the standardization process brought into place by the Flexner Report was an extreme decrease in any religious or faith-based training as part of medical school. In fact, when I went to medical school in the early 80s, there was essentially no references to faith or religion. Overall, as I mentioned in a previous episode, only about 10 out of 210 medical schools in the U.S. included any instruction in faith or spirituality as late as 1990. The prevailing view being that the study of faith or religion was too subjective to include in an already packed curriculum. That began to change by the 2000s, largely as a response to the requests of students. Schools began to recognize again that there was value in learning the basics of faith and religion and spirituality, particularly in relation to ethics. By 2025, over 80 medical schools had incorporated some form of spiritual or religious training into their curriculum. There have been a number of different approaches, including clinical vignettes or workshops, as well as just traditional lectures. The American Association of Medical Colleges, or AAMC, has produced a number of sample curricula that are available for use by the medical schools. And I have come to agree with the inclusion of faith or spirituality in the teaching of medicine. It's important in training new physicians, I believe at least, where many of the ethical values held by the profession originate from, even if many physicians themselves are not religious. It's been demonstrated many times that patients prefer a physician who has some degree of understanding of and respect for their faith. There's no doubt in my mind that we can and should teach our students the skills to interact with patients in this way. And it is a skill, a function of maturity largely. Most physicians will tell you it takes years beyond training to gain the self-awareness to effectively counsel patients, which includes knowing the best way to deal with different or non-standard religious traditions. There are challenges to the inclusion of religious training in medical school. First, on a very practical level, is time. Medical curricula are absolutely packed, and the amount of data we expect physicians to know and understand grows every day. When I was teaching, I used to review the genetics and heredity and molecular DNA portions of the cancer-related curricula for medical students, and it includes at least 10 times as much data as it did when I was in school 40 years ago. Sometimes I don't know how they do it. So where do you include and how do you prioritize religion and faith training among all the other important things that we expect physicians to know? Second, there are boundary-related problems. Some students and professionals express discomfort in discussing these topics. We can and do offer training that helps clarify professional boundaries, but at some point we have to respect the personal autonomy of the individual, and that's an ongoing effort. Third, which might be referred to as inclusivity, the curriculum focuses on being inclusive of all perspectives, including atheism and agnosticism, to support both religious and non-religious patients. We can't possibly cover all aspects of every religious culture, so we must prioritize which are the most important to each school's local mission. Inevitably, someone will be upset because their particular belief was left out. Fourth, and most recently, might be what could be called pushback. On a national and perhaps international level today, there have been calls to return to the basics in a reaction to what many consider an overacceptance of diverse points of view to the detriment of traditional beliefs. Education in general, including medical schools, have been experiencing this in the last few years and will probably continue to do so for the immediate future at least. One personal story that I recall from the old charity hospital days was a patient from North Africa came to see us, and she was a devout Muslim, very fundamentalist form of Islam, and in fact was not supposed to be even examined or seen by a male physician, but we didn't have anybody else there who did what I did. So we convinced her male relatives that that was okay if I saw her in that setting. So I did. At any rate, she had an incision on her tummy, and she said it was from the removal of cyst, which we took that for granted. She now had another cyst, ovarian cyst, and we took her to the operating room and took that out. And then when we examined her in the OR, when she was open, we realized that her uterus looked and felt like a uterus that had had children before. despite the fact that she had told us she had never been pregnant. In fact, she had an incision on the uterus that looked very much like a C-section incision. And for the obstetricians who have done cesarean sections before, you'll know what I'm talking about. You can pretty well tell if somebody has had a cesarean section when you open them back up again for whatever reason. Anyway, so we went ahead and took the cyst out, and she did fine. The cyst ended up being benign, so it was no big deal, and they were very happy with it. We went to her afterward, post-operatively, while she was still in the hospital, and her family wasn't around, and tried to ask her about it. In fact, we had one of our residents at the time who actually spoke Arabic and acted as sort of a translator, counselor for her. And she finally just deferred to her sister, and without saying anything specifically to us, the sister came in and told us, yes, she had been pregnant and had had a child by C-section, and it was considered a scandal in her country at that time. And she had been sent away once they found out she was pregnant to have the baby and didn't come back until after the baby was born. They did not say what happened to the baby after that. And her male relatives had no idea that she'd ever been pregnant. So that's one of the most interesting, I think, personal experiences I've had with the combination of faith and spirituality with medicine. Finally, we're left with the question, should we include religious or faith training in medical school curricula? I've come to the conclusion that we should, based on the reasons I've already stated here, plus one more. Physician burnout. Physician burnout has accelerated in the past few years and has been widely commented on in both the academic and the lay press. When a highly trained physician leaves practice at the height of their professional career, it is the equivalent of losing a massive amount of capital, the money that was invested in training that individual. And it often leaves a hole in the community that can't easily be filled. It's been suggested that incorporating faith and religion topics not only improves patient interactions, it also can assist both students and physicians in practice with professional development skills and help manage stress and hopefully reduce personal burnout. As always, if I've made any substantive errors, please let me know, and I'll try to correct them in a future episode. Also, if you have any questions or comments about the role of faith or spirituality in medicine, particularly if you have any personal stories, please let us know in the comments. If you have an opinion about medical education and how it should include faith or religious training, I'd like to hear that as well. I read all the comments, and I'll try to get back to you as soon as I can. I know many of you have strong opinions on faith and spirituality and probably medical education too. So this is your chance to be heard. We saw some great new music at a fun club in New Orleans called True South this week, and we got some clips from that and a few others.
Two is just as bad. Once it's worse, the third is all so sad. Eagle flies on Friday. Saturday I go out to play. Eagle flies on Friday. Saturday I go out to play. Sunday I go to church.
And that's about all we have this week. Kind of a short one, but I thought it was important to include the use of faith or spiritual education in medical school here. Also, the Blues doctor and his office staff will be going out of town again this week, so I'm not sure yet of the timing of our next podcast. So stay tuned, as they say. Anyway, as I usually say at this time, please watch next week's podcast. Okay? See you later.